Hello, welcome to IC Show TV. I'm Paul Milligan. Welcome to the latest in the series of panel discussions we're having at IC 2018. This one today is looking at the relationship between architects and AV, entitled They Have Aesthetics, We Have Physics, which is actually a quote from one of our participants here. We'll get to him later on. First of all, next to me is Tim Boot from Mayor Sound. We have Francois Villaret from Holoplot. We have an architect. We thought it was only fair to get one of them along. We have Siavosh Adeli from Adeli Interior Architecture, and we have Christian Bozeat from Macom Integration Group. So, gentlemen, what is the current state of the relationship between integrators and consultants and architects? Siavosh, I could maybe let you have the floor first.
For me, to integrate the two systems together, the technology with the architecture, it's to bring more value in the building and to create something alive, which one could completely change the sensation and also the vision of the owner, of the visitors who visit the building interior or from outside, facade, etc. is the same.
How do you find the working relationship between AV engineers or integrators and architects? Is it a difficult one? Is it a fraught one, or is it a smooth one?
It depends. It depends the project, of course. It depends, but so each project is completely different, and we have to create something completely customized and adapt and find the right way with the good team. This is more important. That's why I come each year in ISC. It's not typically my
field of interest or field of knowledge.
But it's interesting to find some good team to can. For each project, for example, we can choosing technologies and to find the right way.
This is for me. Your quotes. I feel like I need to come to you next.
It was a joking quote, but there is often, and it depends where you come in from what type of project it is. If it's a corporate building project, there's an interior design piece. And often then, I think sometimes the architectural pieces, they've designed a building to be beautiful, and so they're artwork, and I can understand that. But the clash of that aesthetic look and the physics we need to deal with, like where do we place our speakers, and what do they look like? I mean, they're big lumpy boxes, and what do we put in the ceiling? And I've got a lovely curved ceiling. Well, that's not going to help my projector. So there are some challenges, I think. I think it's partly the AV industry's fault. Certainly within the UK, there's no or limited education process for engineers coming into the business. I know that in Europe, and certainly our German team, a lot of the guys actually go through and do a degree in audiovisual. Can't have that in the UK. Yeah. And architects spend a long time. I mean, you'd spend 7 years becoming an architect. A lot of people, it's a long time.
It's until the end of our life.
Oh, exactly. and I think from AV, people are starting to see it is to the end of our lives, but we don't necessarily have that weight of that education behind. And so I think sometimes in a construction project, people will go, well, the architect, they see us as the last thing to go into the building rather than necessarily what the building is there for.
Absolutely. Tim, Christian struck on something interesting there. With regards to audio, you always say, good audio is kind of hidden or you can't see it. Does that therefore put it at the expense of architecture sometimes? Do you have that kind of battle sometimes?
I think absolutely, and I think what you were saying that there's traditionally an us and them attitude with audio, especially in architecture. As you just said, there's this idea that you bring the technology in the end. And I think backing up a little bit, we're seeing a philosophical change that architects are starting to see that the sonic and acoustic environment of all spaces, not just the concert hall, but the office space, the healthcare space, these are becoming more important. And there's a lot of metrics to indicate that the sonic environment is very critical. So I think we are seeing opportunities where our products, loudspeaker products and other digital products are being integrated into buildings earlier. And I think the collaboration with architecture is getting better in that, yes, we build big, as you point out, big black silly boxes. Yeah. Architects always ask us, do you really need those there? Yes, we really need those there, and this is why, and yes, we can change the color, but they're still big black boxes. But I think what's really interesting is how we're shifting in the last few years that we're having a dialogue with consultants, dialogue with architects, dialogue with acousticians to create more complete solutions, as opposed to a building with pieces in it.
Well, the technology is moving such a pace. Architecture essentially is as an art form, it's a building, it's a space. That doesn't change. The finishes can change, but the technology within it is moving. And so I think now that and it's great to have a progressive architect, because some don't let the technology inform the space. They want to make the technology be conformed by the space. And I think there's a very different way of looking at it. I don't know what you guys.
Yeah. Francois, how do you find the relationship between, say, integrators and architects?
I mean, actually, as an AV manufacturer and especially a startup, we don't really directly deal with architects, but for sure, it's what Christian said. What we heard is that aesthetics kind of comes first. Yeah. It's a very common statement in the industry. However, as AV manufacturer, we really have to actually go the step further. So start thinking when we are going to design a new project, already think about the integration implications, but also equally what are the impact that our speakers are going to have on the potential design of a new venue.
It's very much a consideration even when designing the product then about the architectural finish. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
And the same at May.
Absolutely agree. I mean, when we look at what the market's looking for, in a big touring show, there's performance.
Yeah.
But because the installation market is so large and has so much growth potential, we absolutely have to consider installation as part of our product development. Okay. And there's a lot of complexities to go along with that.
Sure. Moving on to the second question, will the desire of those in charge of designing and installing into technology always play second fiddle to the architectural aesthetic? Christian, do you think it'll always...
So I would say I hope not.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it depends if you get a progressive architect who's interested in the technology or one that's just building a space. I think part of that is driven by the construction industry itself. The construction industry is a big constraint on innovative technology. So, I think that it is changing, and I think that it will start to change as people see more of the things that this does. This show's bigger than ever, and there's more opportunity for display devices and audio solutions, which just are mind-warpingly clever. But the spaces need to move with those. The way we work, the whole way that people work. We were talking, there's millennials, there's Generation Alpha, they're all going to be working in a different way. Architecturally, people who are designing those spaces need to move with the technology. And I can't see how they can avoid it.
Each year is changing. That's the problem. Okay. That's why we are obligated to come each year and to see the evolution. The evolution. For example, I was in the stand of Layard, with who we was working for the big screens and also the effect of the Emirates sky in the ceiling in United Nations. And I saw the evolution 3 years before when we choose, it was 1.6 millimeter pitch, all the effect of LED, and now it's 0.9, 0.7, something like that. And each next year will be 0.1 maybe.
But with display devices like that, if you're doing stadium spaces or big, large corporate buildings, the structure of the building, putting some of these things in, you used to have a projector pointing at a screen. Now you've got a ton of metal hanging off your ceiling, and so structurally we've also got to take those into account as well, even down to the small meeting rooms and how the building, spaces are built and where technology goes and how. Architecturally, I think sometimes people are challenged by how many connectors and cable types and how hot the hardware gets, and all of those things. If the design process doesn't embrace that technology from very early on and bring us into that process, they go, oh yeah, we've got this lovely room with this slatted ceiling and the screen's going to be on that wall. Okay, well, where's the hardware going to go? Well, it's centrally. Well, your comms room's got to be changed. You've got to have a room for the AV support team to work in. Well, I don't have that in my design. So there's a lot of things there that actually will change.
Tim, you and nodding.
Yeah, no. I think this integration has to, because buildings have essentially become more complicated, and I think also with the modern way we design buildings. When the very first projects I worked on, most people were still working on paper, and we had moved into 2D CAD. Now we're in a world of Revit, BIM, where a lot of the engineering, design, even constructability questions are solved in the design process. So we do have these opportunities with modern technology to create more integrated systems.
Yeah.
But again, I think, if you ask the question about aesthetic integration, I think this is critical. I was very lucky years ago to work with the famous academician Yasu Toyota. And Yasu always said, the building has to look the way it sounds. And he's famous for his acoustics, but it's very true. The aesthetics of a space need to mimic its function. If you want the room to support angry, loud rock and roll, then the aesthetics and the layout of the space, the architecture must be compatible.
Yeah.
And when you look at other spaces, there's a very important compatibility of aesthetics, space planning, engineering, along with the sound and the video.
Yeah.
And that's really important for us at Meyer Sound.
I think that's a really important point. And it's not just from architecture. If somebody said we've got an auditorium, well, it's actually not. It's a standard height room that's split into 3 parts. That's not an auditorium. It's 3 different meeting rooms. Has a very different acoustic property, a very different requirement for the space. But if you have a collaboration space with some open boards and people working within that space, they're working in a different manner. Aesthetically, it has to be pleasing to work in, but it also has to have the function of the.
Siavosh, Christian mentioned the different generations that are at work at the moment, Gen X, millennials, people like that. Are we seeing is there a generational shift in architects? Are younger architects more willing to incorporate technology into designs than maybe ones in their 50s and 60s? Does that exist, or is it just each architect is different?
It's a great question, because normally, if we work with the audiovisual engineering to create all the feasibility of what we have in our mind, normally the person becomes crazy at the end of the project, because some architects, for example like me, you're very we have to check all the details, everything is for example has to be calculated. For example, when we create the effect of the sky, I was maybe past 1 week with the person who created the movie. I saw to him, I don't like this cloud, this shape, you have to change, change this effect to put in the hour, for example, 12 hours, 2 hours, etc. He became finally crazy. It's about how we can manage a project like this and to finish on time. Because residential is one thing. Residential, we have, if we don't finish on exactly the day D, it's not important. But when we work for the government project, and they give us the request to exactly finish the day D, for the audiovisual department who arrives on the end of the project to integrate all the.
That's a big challenge.
This is a big challenge.
Yeah, the whole.
If they was confronted with a very bad situation when they worked with the project of UN.
I think it's actually sad that you say they come at the end of the project.
Yes,
exactly. Because again, I think the conversation we as an industry would like to have is to work together from the beginning. Because
end of the project, but we have to thinking from the beginning, but they will coming on the end.
How early do you implicate, for example, ENB integrators in your conception phase?
1 year before.
1 year before.
See, I think there's an architectural piece. We've got a project at the moment where there's an architectural piece, there's an artist piece, and there's an AV piece. And to then to coordinate all of those things together, we have to be part of the professional team at the very beginning, advising and talking and informing the shape. So that's, as the architect is appointed, from our perspective, the consultant needs to be working with the client even before to talk about their strategy for the technology, how it's going to be managed, supported, and
the desired sound impression.
And then the final piece has to have an end point, and then we can help and work and actually provide the architects with the quality information early on. However, we always get asked for, what are your power loads, what's your heat loads? Well, we haven't even got a design for it yet, so how am I going to know?
That sort of touches on the last question, really. I mean, looking forward, do we see things improving? Is it purely based on, like Tim said, getting in as early as you can? I know, Christian, you've said that as well, getting into those very early meetings where you can say your piece or have an influence in some degree, because sometimes you're so far down the line that all the decisions have been made already and you just have to kind of deal with it.
I actually think it's got to be a step change, not necessarily in the architectural piece, or in our part of it, it's got to be a step change from the client's perspective.
I completely agree.
And the step change from the client has got to be, they've got to take audio-visual pieces as mission critical, and once that becomes a mission critical part of the project, it has the same weighting as as the architectural piece, as the M&E piece, and once they understand the audio piece has the same weighting as the video piece. Once that strategy and that plan is in place from them, that I think will be the step change.
For example, point of view, electricity. If we create an audiovisual effect, the engineer of electricity has to calculate all from the start of the project. At the moment we start the demolition, for example, if we transform a house or we construct a house, all has to be calculated to have all to be prepared when the audiovisual team arrives. And this is the engineer of electricity who normally study everything about the feasibility, etc., from the beginning of the project.
Tim, is it crucial we get in early
Absolutely.
the AV side of things?
I think especially for companies that are innovating. I mean, Myers Sound, we're innovating. You guys are clearly innovating in new space. And what we're doing, we don't just sell black loudspeakers for rock and roll. We create, for example, we have a constellation system that allows you to completely change the acoustics of a room. Now that's fantastic in changing an existing room, but the reality is for an architect, this allows the architect to create spaces they've never imagined before. Yeah. And so I think this conversation between manufacturers who are innovating in our space, to be able to begin that conversation with the design community early on so that we can talk about these innovations we're creating that will push the boundaries of building system, building design. Again, if we as a company can create systems that allow you to completely rethink spaces, which we're doing, that gives you guys incredible power and a much broader palette of tools to start designing buildings, even from the very basic level. I mean, does the room have to be square, round, or rectangular? We actually can help you make those decisions, not just where does the black boxes go. And again, I think we're seeing the industry understand that the conversation is much broader and needs to begin at the beginning in order to create innovative and useful and practical spaces.
Just couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's very true. I think everyone kind of share in the whole ecosystem is part of responsibility here. I totally agree with Christian. We need to kind of change the mindset of the client, but I think also it's kind of the responsibility of the architect and also of the integrator to kind of educate the client for new technologies. And we are the one, for example, with Meyer or HoloPlot, we are the one bringing the new technologies, right? Yes. And actually, to go even one step further, as a startup, we are the one really at the forefront of technology, really risking, of course, but also way more efficient and way more quick than the bit bigger structures. And I think it's also the role of the whole ecosystem to really look into this new technology and really, maybe this technology, for example, the one we do, where we are able to really steer sound almost like light, or we can, for example, completely hide it behind the cloth without having the sound pressure that is going to being impacted on the screen. This kind of technology, the client or the integrator really need to kind of dig for it, right? So it's really, I think we all share responsibility.
Sure, it's interesting to hear you say that kind of everyone has to take a part of the responsibility in terms of, because normally it's, Group A will blame Group B, and that's the end of the discussion. But I'm going to do something rather cruel at the end. Siavosh, you've got an audience of integrators and consultants watching. Is there any kind of message from your side of the fence that maybe you'd like to say to those guys? Is there anything that you'd maybe want them to change or to do that would make your life simpler or easier? Or?
No, in conclusion, I invite all architects to bring some audiovisual creation on their creation in the base, because it's changed completely. Because when the people arrives and find an architecture space inside or outside, they look like this. They discover. But at the moment you put the button on and the audiovisual effects also working, the reaction is wow. And I experienced myself this effect with two big projects which one we realized, including the United Nations project. And I saw this reaction, And for us, it was something really amazing. Because we feel the sensation of all people who find our works, and to integrate two different things together, it's become something really powerful.
Yeah, I think everyone,
and unique.
Everyone here, the consultant, manufacturers, we're all in a sort of experience game, aren't we? We're all there to produce an experience. So yeah, it's a great way to finish. Thank you very much, and thanks, gents, for your time.
Thank you very much.